Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fred Kittenger with University of Central Florida, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2017 Sheriff's Community Crime Summit. Each of you have answered an invitation to join us this morning, and by doing so, your presence reflects a cross-section of our community. Law enforcement officers, elected officials, business, neighborhood, community leaders, educators, school psychologists, healthcare officials, residents, neighbors, and friends have all gathered here with one common denominator. We all seriously care about the safety and security of our community, for our residents, as well as for our visitors. And we thank you for joining us this morning. To properly begin this morning, I'm going to ask you to please rise for the presentation of the colors by the Orange County Sheriff's Honor Guard and the singing of the national anthem by recording artist Britani. Britani has a very personal and special connection with this group and this event this morning. She is the cousin of Deputy First Class Norman Lewis. And as many of you all remember, Deputy Lewis, on January 9th, 2017, was on patrol when he was answering a call to help aid in the apprehension of a subject who had just shot and killed Orlando Police Lieutenant Deborah Clayton. On the way to answering that call, Deputy Lewis was hit by a vehicle that had run a red light. He was rushed to the trauma center, but unfortunately, Deputy Lewis succumbed to his injuries. So we're so pleased and honored to have Britani here with us this morning. I'll ask you to remain standing after the national anthem for the retiring of the colors and for our invocation, which will be delivered this morning by Sister Jean Riggs of the Orange County Sheriff's Office, Chaplain's Office.
Carry colors. Roll, pick. Forward. Detail. Roll, pick. Present.
Oh, say, can you see by the dark early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
word.
Good morning and blessings. Almighty and ever-loving God, in a world of broken values, the men and women of law enforcement stand vigilant. They are stalwarts of our rights, our safety, our freedom, and most importantly, our lives. In a world where respectable people find their children being drawn to attractive internet sites, where they are lured into a web of deceit, we find our officers and deputies working long, tedious hours to prevent stolen innocence from falling victim to cunning lies with sinister motives. Where peaceful, safe neighborhoods, havens where children play and elderly take leisurely afternoon strolls, become the targets by those who lay siege to claimed areas of turf as their personal territory. Deputies and officers are present to take swift and immediate measures, making safe again our city's streets and neighborhoods. Yes, Lord, may your grace and ever-watchful presence accompany our men and women who walk that thin blue line of service in justice to protect and defend. They hear the muffled cries of those exploited victims and are not immune to those cries. It causes one to take pause and reflect on the biblical snake in the Garden of Eden. Beware, do not taste of forbidden enticements, for once ingested will poison the essence of the soul and consume the very fabric of our society. We invoke your blessings, O Lord. Heavenly Father, as we begin our 2017 Crime Summit Conference, we pray for its success, and we call upon the grace of your insight to come upon each of us so that we will be able to discern with wisdom the significance of what we will learn today. For the grace of your fortitude, so that with courage we will embrace the pursuit of justice on behalf of those unable to seek a determination of their rights. And with humility, we ask for the grace of your compassion so that we may feel with true empathy the plight of those whose dignity and shattered lives look to us for hope. Amen.
Thank you, Sister Jean, for the invocation this morning, and also a heartfelt and large thank you to Britani for sharing her talents this morning. Britani, I'm sure as much as we enjoyed hearing you this morning, there's one soul above us who is smiling down with a very broad and proud smile on his face, and that is your cousin. Thank you, Britani, so much for sharing your talents this morning. Please join me in thanking Britani. Thank you. Well, it is now my pleasure to introduce our leadoff batter for this morning's festivities. Sheriff Jerry Demings is a homegrown success story. A man who was born and raised here, grew up here in Central Florida, to only come back to be one of our community's greatest and strongest leaders. He went to Florida State University, where he received his bachelor's degree in finance. Also received his Master's in Business Administration from Orlando College, which is now Everest University. And Sheriff Demings has hit professionally, in baseball parlance, he has hit for the cycle. He was the first African-American appointed police chief of the city of Orlando, the first African-American to be appointed as the public safety leader for Orange County government, the first African-American to be elected sheriff of Orange County, and as such, the first African-American constitutional officer elected in Orange County. And more recently, he was the first African-American to be selected by his peers to be president of the Florida Sheriff's Association. Please join me in welcoming our sheriff, Sheriff Jerry Demings.
Good morning. If you're like me, I count it as a blessing to be able to live in the greatest nation in the world. Let me say thank you to all of our individuals who have participated in our program at this point. Britani, I look forward to seeing and hearing your CD that will be released soon, right? Let me say thank you to Fred Kittenger also. Fred Kittenger has, I think, only missed one of the 10 crime summits that we have done in the last few years. And so I do thank him immensely for his role and his leadership in this community, as well as one of the vice presidents at the University of Central Florida. Today we have a great program planned for you. The reason that we do the Crime Summit each year is so that we can give feedback to our community about the status of crime in our county, and also receive feedback from you about those things that we need to work together to address those issues. On today's program, you're going to get an update from Major Rick Meli here shortly about the status of crime in Orange County. You're going to hear some dialogue on our global war on terrorism. You're going to hear about 21st century awareness, and you're going to hear about a great program here in terms of our community resources. We will give you an update on emerging technology and the use of body-worn cameras in our agency. You're going to hear from a keynote speaker, Mr. Anil Gupta, who is a world-renowned presenter. And then we will close out the program. Let me also acknowledge some individuals who are here this morning, our elected officials and others. We have with us this morning Florida State Representative Bruce Antone. If you can stand and be recognized. We have Mayor Gary Broom from the town of Windermere, Mayor Eddie Cole from the town of Eatonville, Orange County Commissioner Pete Clark, Apopka Police Chief Mike McKinley, Winter Park Police Chief Mike Deal, Ocoee Police Chief Charlie Brown, Special Agent in Charge Danny Banks of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Regional Office here in the Metro Orlando area, Assistant Agent in Charge Ron Harper from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We also have Special Agent in Charge Jeffrey T. Walsh of the Drug Enforcement Administration, Patrol Agent in Charge Jeff Sutherland from the United States Border Patrol, Orange County Corrections Chief Cornita Riley, Executive Dean Dr. Jeffrey Goltz from the Valencia College, and MBI Director Ron Stucker. If I've missed any elected officials, would you stand at this time and be recognized? We also have U.S. Marshal for the Middle District of Florida, Mr. William Berger. Please stand and be recognized as well. At this point, we're going to move forward with our program. I'm going to turn it back over to our facilitator and moderator, Mr. Fred Kittenger. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Sheriff Demings. And as you all heard, the sheriff and his team have put together a great waterfront of speakers and topics that are timely, contemporary, and very pertinent here to the safety of our community. To lead us off this morning, we're first going to get grounded on the facts. We're going to have a presentation on crime data. What are some of the trends? What are some of the anomalies out there when it comes to the safety of our community? We're fortunate to be joined this morning by Major Rick Meli of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Major Meli is a 28-year veteran of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. He is currently assigned to the Criminal Investigations Division, which includes the General Assignment Section, Major Case Section, Narcotics Section, as well as Forensics and Evidence Sections. In addition to his current command, he has served in various ranks in the Uniform Patrol Division, Criminal Investigation Division, Training Section, Narcotics Section, Specialized Patrol, Human Resources, and Quality Assurance. I guess you just can't keep a job. No, I'm just kidding, just kidding. He spent 15 years with the agency's SWAT team and currently retains the additional responsibility as one of the agency's high-risk incident commanders. Major Meli received his bachelor's degree in general studies with a minor in criminal justice from Columbia College and is a graduate of the Florida Sheriff's Association Commanders Academy. Please join me in welcoming Major Meli.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2017 Orange County Sheriff's Office Community Crime Summit. I can't believe it's been another year. Time has gone quick this year. Today I'm here to talk to you about crime in Orange County. What I'm going to do is basically give you an overview for 2017, what our numbers look like. The numbers are from January through August, so please keep that in mind as I go through these numbers. I'll also talk about some trends that we've seen over the last year and kind of do a comparable between 2017 and 2016 and how we're doing as an agency and how we're doing as a community in Orange County when it comes to crime. So before I get started, I'm going to kind of give you a video of some of our high-profile cases and bring you back to this year, and we'll move on to the numbers from there. So.
Police going door to door at this apartment complex, searching for the man police say gunned down one of Orlando's finest.
We're going to bring this dirtbag to justice.
Just after 7 a.m., Master Sergeant Deborah Clayton, a 17-year veteran, is on duty outside this Walmart when someone alerts her that a wanted murder suspect named Markeith Lloyd is in the store.
There was a short foot pursuit, and as soon as she said stop, he basically opened fire.
An Orange County deputy searching for the fugitive was also killed when his motorcycle was hit in a traffic accident. Deputy First Class Norman Lewis was an 11-year veteran.
Folks going to work Monday morning stopped in their tracks, hearing shot after shot.
I thought there was possibly another terrorist attack, honestly. I was hoping for the best.
Orange County Sheriff Jerry Demings says someone inside Fiamma Incorporated called 911 at 8:03 reporting an active shooter. Deputies responding in less than 2 minutes.
Once they arrived here, they found multiple individuals that had been shot.
A traumatic end to a trip to the doctor. 2 patients and a child watched in horror as 2 men carrying guns demanded cash from Dr. Ashok Khanna. Then, cash in hand, one shot him in the leg.
Now, the sheriff's office has confirmed that one woman was shot and taken to the hospital. Witnesses tell us the victim was an innocent bystander who was caught in gunfire between young men who were arguing at the gas station.
Now, behind me, you can see that yellow house. That's where detectives right now at the Orange County Sheriff's Office, including homicide detectives, are out here. The body of someone is lying on the yard, in the yard right there, just outside the house.
Stay in the car! Stay in the car! County got one running. Vehicle clear. Stop!
When deputies got here, they found the 2 victims, both of them teenagers, lying on the ground here outside of a house, and both young men were taken to the hospital, but unfortunately, they did succumb to their injuries.
5 people shot on North Lane near Pine Hills Road. Orlando police say one of them, 47-year-old Jeffrey Webb, was pronounced dead at the hospital. Residents say the near constant violence in Pine Hills needs to stop.
We have approximately 100 officers out here. Our emergency response team responded to search the large wooded area.
A few hours later, good news. She and the suspect were found in a car nearby here on 19th Street.
And it's so important for our citizens in Orange County to get involved when we have a case like this. We did get flagged down by a citizen who told us where they were. All right, and I do believe that statement, by the way. It really is important for our community to get involved, to assist us in cases like that, or any high-profile cases that we're working out there. Before I move on to the numbers, hopefully that brought you back a little bit to some of the events that occurred over the last year. I want to introduce our senior staff and our senior management of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Obviously, you all met this morning, Sheriff Jerry L. Demings. I'll move on to the structure of our agency, kind of give you a little background so you know how we're structured from the management side and our senior staff. We have Under Sheriff Ray Rivero, and he's in the back there. Under his command, we have Comptroller Andy DiLoretto and General Counsel Bernie Rice. As far as our senior staff and the way our organization is broke down, we have two separate bureaus. One is the Administration Services Bureau, which is led by Chief Deputy Larry Zwig, and under his command is Major Jeffrey Stonebreaker, Major Joe Picanzo, and Director Sharon Donahue. Under the Operational Services Bureau is Chief Deputy Nancy Brown, and under her command is Major Denise Demps, myself, and Major Michael Doby. I wanted to introduce you folks to everybody so you see who we are. And throughout this morning, please take the time to say hello and talk to us. We'll be out here for the remainder of the day. All right, so let's talk about the numbers a little bit, where we're at. Before I get into them, I want to give you a little definition of how the numbers work, so everybody has an understanding of the different things we look at as a law enforcement agency. Our report card, or probably the main numbers that we look at, is called the Uniform Crime Report. And that is the nation's standard by the federal government, which looks at overall crime in our nation. Each local law enforcement agency every year, annually, will provide the federal government or the FBI with an annual report that shows what the numbers were for that local agency. Obviously, that's compiled and a yearly report is put out for the nation. The Uniform Crime Report for us, just to give you an idea of kind of how it works, it's very specific in definition. So they're looking for very specific crimes. We also have another way of looking at crimes in our community, which is called our CompStat, and I'll explain that definition when I get to it, but that's looked at a little bit differently. So when I talk about the Uniform Crime Report, again, realize that it's very specific to what our nation is looking for, the federal government's looking for. If you look at our violent crimes, murder is down 40% this year, which is great. It's excellent. Forcible sex crimes are down 7%, robberies are down 14%, and aggravated persons crimes are down 17%. Our violent crime index overall, and again, these numbers January through August, is down 15%. And I've been here 28 years, and I can tell you, it's probably some of the best numbers I've seen in my career. And hopefully we'll continue in that direction through the end of December. So, on the nonviolent crime index, again, they're looking at more property crimes and those type of events. Burglary to autos, you're showing an increase of 11%, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Burglary residential, we're down 28%. Auto theft, we're down 2%. And larceny, we're down 6%. Now, remember what I said about UCR, very definitive of how they define crimes and what they're looking for. When it comes to auto burglaries, if I break into a car and I take somebody's purse out of there, per the Uniform Crime Report, that theft of the purse is actually considered larceny. So it's not tracked under the auto burglary. So realize that that number seems high in the UCR, but if you look at the larceny, where the actual theft occurs out of that vehicle, that number is relatively low. It's negative 6%. Hopefully I explained that okay. The overall comparison, and we're just comparing 2011 through 2017. As you can see, the numbers, 2011, we saw a decrease, and you see the numbers there, the percentages, which is like the white block in each bottom one. That shows your overall percentage. Again, we're at negative 15% for 2015. If you compare it to 2016, we were negative 2%. So significant decrease from last year's overall UCR. We did have a spike, obviously, through 2013, both violent and nonviolent, and into 2014, and we're slowly decreasing over the last few years, which is excellent. And I believe that's a combination of hard work by the Orange County Sheriff's Office, our local partners, other agencies within Central Florida, and obviously our federal partners working together to get the job done. So, all right, so let's talk about our CompStat. Again, I said, like I told you earlier, there's the Uniform Crime Report and there's the CompStat numbers. Our CompStat is what we use as an agency to direct us operationally to solve the problems in our community. CompStat's looked at every day. As an agency, we have, every 3 weeks, we have a meeting, a CompStat meeting, where we put everything together and make decisions, what direction we're going to do, what problems we need to solve. So our numbers are more, or our statistics are more specific to the crimes in our community. If you look at the CompStat numbers, again, homicides, remember now this is January through August. We were at 28 homicides in Orange County compared to 46 this time last year. Currently, to date, I believe we're at 32 homicides, and I believe 46 to 48 as far as the comparable goes. Robberies were down 14%. Persons crimes were down, sorry, can't see from this direction. We're down, we're down 9%. Sex crimes were pretty flat, 0%. Auto thefts were down negative 7%. Residential burglaries are down 21%. Commercial burglaries, again, pretty flat, pretty even compared to last year. And our auto burglaries are down 3%. If you all recall last year, and if you weren't here last year, we had a significant increase in our auto burglaries throughout Orange County. Between operational plans and working hard to drive those numbers down, we started in January at like plus 28%. And currently, if you look at the numbers, we're below the numbers at negative 3% now. So with that trend's kind of gone, I think it's, again, from a lot of hard work from the law enforcement agencies that are out there working. So, next slide kind of gives you an overall picture, just a graph. If you look 2011 through 2017, the top bar is property crimes. So it gives you kind of a scale of how we've done here in the last 7 years. Obviously, there was an increase. We slowly went down. We spiked a little bit in 2016 on the property crimes. Again, that was due to our auto burglary problem that we had last year, and a significant decrease for 2017. The bottom line is our violent crime, and as you can see, again, it spiked in that 2013-14 years, and then obviously a significant decrease into 2017. All right, I got one more quick video for you, and then we'll talk about some of the issues and trends that we're seeing in Orange County.
Fentanyl, considered one of the deadliest drugs on the street, and is now linked to the death of a 10-year-old child in Miami last month.
This is worse than heroin. So heroin will be 2 to 3 times more powerful than morphine. And when you're talking about fentanyl, that's up to 100 times more powerful than morphine.
A toxicology report shows Vincent had a deadly mix of heroin and fentanyl in his system.
Even a very small amount can kill both an adult and a child in a very short period of time.
When our detective was there, he was overcome and had trouble breathing.
That detective and 2 other officers were treated. It happened 10 weeks after this written directive went out, warning officers not to handle any potential heroin without gloves or a mask, due to several incidents nationwide where officers had overdosed as a result of skin contact with suspected heroin, which later was found to contain fentanyl.
So when you mix this with heroin, it sounds like it's instant death. It can be.
Obviously, one of the issues we're looking at in Orange County right now is our heroin fentanyl epidemic. And I know there's more discussion later this morning from other folks that will be just getting more detailed than I am. But I did want to give you a broad overview of the numbers and how they look comparably to last year. Again, I believe personally, I reach out to other folks and throughout our nation, other cities, as we do see an increase here in Orange County, but comparably to other cities, we're not as bad, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But we have an issue out there, and let me give you the numbers so you understand where I'm coming from. But if you look at the overall overdoses, make sure I got the right screen up. Comparably to 2016, we had 370 reported overdoses to Orange County Sheriff's Office. This year, we're currently at 691 reported. That's overall. That includes all drugs. Our overdose deaths, they're even right now, 51 to 51, and I'll explain why that probably is, even with the increase of actual overdoses. Now, our heroin overdoses, and realize heroin a lot of times out there is now mixed with fentanyl. We are currently at 465 reported compared to 179 last year, which is a 160% spike. The overall deaths for heroin overdoses is 31 compared to 17 this time last year. Now our agency, and if you recall, if you were here last year, we recently went to Narcan. Narcan's saving lives out there. I know there's other local agencies within Central Florida are now carrying it also, UCF and some other agencies. Our numbers to date are just over 50 deployments from our personnel alone. And obviously the fire department and paramedics that respond to those scenes are also deploying it. And we're saving lives out there. We really are. So our overall deaths can be significantly much higher than they are. On another trend, our firearms discharges, our violent crime. If you all recall, especially from the video and the news events that were out there, Pine Hills became an issue early in 2017. As an agency, we took measures to put together operational plans, work with our local partners, and get out there with the community. We had several community programs that we developed, and I'll talk about those a little bit more in another slide. But with all those folks working together, we were able to drive that violent crime down significantly. But if you look at the overall heat map, just to give you an idea of the Orange County in a whole, the green, if you can't see it, is actually calls for service, discharged firearms or weapons. You can see the clusters, which areas are significant. You see West Orange County, somewhat of the Pine Hills area, and East Orange County. The aggravated persons crimes, the red, those are actual shootings or aggravated crimes with a victim. The yellow is homicides, and the blue are robbery crimes. So it's a good way to give you an overall picture of how it looks out there with our statistics. Real quickly, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but these are some of the significant events that we saw throughout 2017. We had an incident on 1500 block of Ravenna Drive. It was domestic related. The suspect actually murdered his mother and his brother. He fled to New York and was apprehended and is now in custody, getting ready to go to trial. We had a case up in 2427 Forsyth Road. That was Fiamma, as you all recall from the video also. Obviously, the suspect in that case took his own life. The Eagle Landing Apartments, where we had a 3-year-old victim, unfortunate child abuse by mother and 2 other persons living in the home. The 4000 block of Colonial Drive, victims were in a parking lot gas station. They were fired upon by a 16-year-old and a 17-year-old. And again, we'll talk about juvenile crime just a little bit at the end here. Obviously, we were able to identify them, and the suspects were arrested. They were also driving a stolen vehicle at the time. The 10th Avenue and 6th Avenue in Taft was a drug-related case. The suspect tried to fire upon the victim, and he was able to get away. And he, in return, went after the victim in his vehicle. It was a drug-related case, and we were able to make an arrest on it. And the last one I'll just kind of highlight is the 5000 block of Bowling Drive, where the victim was approached by the suspect and forced to remove his clothing. It was a robbery. puts the victim in the trunk. He fires multiple rounds into the truck, striking the victim. Lucky enough, we were able to get a crime line tip, which helped us identify who the suspect was in this case and obviously make an arrest. And again, you see the crime line logo on the bottom here. I can't say enough about crime line. I don't know if Barb's here or not, but we work together with them, and all our local agencies do, and they help us tremendously. So please, if you have something you want to stay anonymous, contact crime line and get that information to us. All right, so what have we done as an agency to kind of combat crime in our community? These are some of the examples. It's not everything. But on the left side, you can see some of the operations we ran. Operation Deadbolt, Multi-County Offenders Initiative, the Pine Hill Joint Operation, that was through the end of 2016 and 2017. Gun Ownership Initiative in 2016, Violent Crimes Initiative, Heroes Against Heroin Task Force, and I know Captain Espinosa will be talking a little bit more about that later on, and the Holiday Detail, which we run every year. On the right is more community-oriented. Some of the events we ran with the community to try to get community involvement and us working with our community to help solve the problems in specific areas in the county. Pine Hill's Proud, Kicks for Guns, End of Summer Bash, National Night Out, Be a Good Neighbor, Civilian Police Academy, Teen Academy, Yearly Crime Summit, which we're here, and Coffee with a Cop, Community Cleanup. So just an example of some of the stuff that we do to try to help solve crimes in our community and work with our community to make this a better place. So, just real quick, a couple of the main trends we're seeing: quality of life issues. Obviously, our narcotics issues is one of the biggest ones right now. The heroin abuse, and everybody knows narcotics relates to other crimes. There's a nexus between the two. So if we have an issue with the heroin, and we're going to have issue with other crimes, especially property crimes. The firearms, illegal firearms, and obviously the violent crime. We saw a significant reduction this year throughout the county, which is excellent, but there's still an issue out there. So we need to stay on top of it. And it says truancy, but obviously our juvenile crime. If you notice some of the significant events, we've got 16, 17-year-old folks out there, or juveniles, who are committing crimes and violent crimes. So that's one of the top things we're looking at to try to solve those crimes and get community help for those juveniles and get them in the right direction. So, and I can't end this without keeping to the last 6 years. So Chief Deputy Brown isn't here, but this is usually for her. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today. But Ranger says goodbye, and he's always in the PowerPoint, so I'm sticking with it. That's all I have, folks. Thank you. Hopefully you're up to date on where we are as a county. If you have any questions for me, I'll be around throughout the morning, and I thank you.
Thank you so much, Major Meli, for that great snapshot of crime statistics here in Orange County. I am definitely optimistic when I see the violent crime rate down 15%, the nonviolent down 5% in aggregate. That is phenomenal. At the same time, you still see those warning signs out there, like you mentioned, with legal firearms, narcotics, and truancy and juvenile crimes. So today, our next speaker reflects in more detail upon a subject that the Major mentioned, and that has to do with the growing heroin and opioid epidemic that we're seeing not just here in Central Florida or the state, but across the nation. You cannot go more than a day or two without seeing an article in any paper, metropolitan or otherwise, that's talking about this epidemic. You hear the discussions taking place in the chambers of city councils, county commissions, state legislatures, and in the halls of Washington, D.C. And we're very fortunate to have here this morning Dr. Rawls with Orange County is our next speaker here this morning. Dr. Rawls is currently serves as Orange County's Director of Health and Public Safety. Prior to earning his medical degree, Dr. Rawls served as a firefighter paramedic with Miami-Dade Fire Rescue. After graduating from the University of Miami School of Medicine with honors, Dr. Rolls completed emergency medicine residency training at Orlando Regional Medical Center, serving as chief resident. He went on to complete a fellowship in emergency medical services and has since been certified as a diplomate of the American Board of Emergency Medicine. He is a member of the American College of Emergency Physicians, Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Medical Society, Central Florida's Urban Search and Rescue Team, and is a past president of Florida Association of EMS Medical Directors. His current academic appointments include Fellowship Director of the Orange County EMS Physician Fellowship Program, Clinical Associate Professor at FSU's College of Medicine, and Faculty Physician with ORMC's Emergency Medical Residency Program. In addition to his administrative duties, Dr. Rolls continues to serve as a medical director for Orange County's EMS system, one of the largest systems in the southeastern United States. He has over 30 years of experience in the public safety arena, and by reading that bio this morning, Dr. Rolls, I think you're probably sleeping, 3-4 hours a night if you're lucky. But thank you so much for bringing your experience and talents with us this morning. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Rolls.
All right, so let me start by apologizing about that bio. I told Carol burn that thing and don't use it again. But anyways, I'm happy to be here with you this morning and talk a little bit more about the heroin and opioid crisis. Carol Burkett was supposed to be here, and she had to travel out of town unexpectedly. So I will also apologize for the downgrade. For anybody who knows Carol Burkett, she's a great presenter, and we're going to miss her this morning. But I'm going to try to go through our data a little bit more in depth. You know that this is not news to anybody. We've been talking about opioid and heroin-related problems across the country for some time now. I'm going to be partnering with Captain Espinosa, who's going to go over the law enforcement component of this presentation. But we're going to quickly cover some data, talk about the Orange County Heroin Task Force and what's been accomplished there. Talk a little bit more about naloxone, what's happening with the implementation of task force recommendations, and some federal and state funding that came our way. So, again, this is not news. We know that this is a full-blown national crisis. Opioids, and I'm talking about diverted illegal use of opioids, are killing more people in this country than guns, than car accidents, and that really should be, just completely, mind-blowing to us. This is nowhere near the end either. We've been talking about it for years, and you heard from the previous presenters' data that we're not coming down after all of this work and all of this time. We're still sort of plateauing on this issue of opioid deaths. The trends all look like this. They all have sharp increases over the last several years where people moved away from the illegal, illicit use of prescription pills that contain opioids to using heroin and then using heroin and fentanyl combinations and other sort of analogs of those drugs. And again, the trends sharply up, and the deaths followed that. The data that comes from the ME's office, see these color sort of heat maps, if you will, fill in, as you would expect. Every year, the areas where you have most population in the state become darker because you have more and more people engaged in these activities, more people dying from the use of opioids. It's actually, a particularly difficult problem for us in Central Florida. People ask the question about whether or not the heroin overdose deaths, the fentanyl overdose deaths, have anything to do with the clamping down on the pill mills. And I will tell you, I think the data supports that. Many of the people that were identified as new users of heroin were former illicit users of prescription pills. So that market that has dried up has created a whole new problem for us. And I think you'll hear from other folks, and you probably have heard already, this certainly is not a law enforcement only problem. This is a supply and demand issue where law enforcement will do everything they can to address the supply side of things, but if we don't address the demand side, there's just going to be continual workarounds on the people selling these drugs and trying to get them on the street. We had seen in our ninth district for a medical examiner numbers that looked like that. So, and you can see for the Osceola and Orange County area. Orange County actually represented more of the deaths than we saw in Osceola, Orange County being the orange bar. The number of hospital admissions, which also comes with significant costs, are increasing. We've identified this as $1 billion a year problem when it comes to healthcare related issues. And that's, again, not going down yet. If you look at this graph here that shows data from hospitals, it gives you a little bit, about information about the geographics of the problem. When you got a lot of activity out on the east side of the county, you got a lot of activity related to ER visits for heroin-related, opioid-related problems in the downtown area. But this is a 4-year span, 2010, 2014. The overall number is 378. But look what happened in 2015. One single year, we had already achieved the same number. And again, those numbers have continued to increase. Oops, sorry. And who's dying from this drug? Heroin and heroin-related deaths. It tends to be younger males. There's also an ethnicity demographic where they say it's usually younger, white, non-Hispanic males. But I'll tell you, I don't know for sure how reliable that is. I think this is definitely across numerous different racial and ethnic boundaries. Again, you probably know, since you're out on the street doing this on a regular basis, where these overdoses are happening. But this is the data that came out of the Department of Health that shows, again, we got hotspots along the 436 corridor. We got hotspots in the southern part of the county, and there's no particular area that's immune to it. What about fentanyl? Fentanyl, remind us that this is, not a heroin conversation anymore. It's really an opioid addiction conversation, and they'll find, people that are using this and supplying these drugs are going to find some way to get access to something that causes the same effect. And in case you didn't know, fentanyl's in the back of every EMS unit in the county. We use fentanyl regularly in the paramedic world. We use fentanyl regularly in emergency medicine and hospital-based world. We're completely familiar with the use of fentanyl. Fentanyl should not scare anybody. If you go to the hospital and they want to give you fentanyl, don't be surprised, because that's very, very common. The problem is that fentanyl that's on the street is not made by a pharmaceutical company. It's hard to predict what's in there. It's hard to predict how it was mixed. And then you also have the problem with analogs of fentanyl. So it's not just standard fentanyl. You have acrofentanyl, you have carfentanyl, and other combinations that escalate the lethality of this drug. But again, through the roof, the presence of fentanyl in our ME data. And this isn't to say that it's the only drug that was in their system. A lot of times the fentanyl was combined with heroin, so there might be some duplication. But again, it has become part of our reality. The numbers continue to march across the state, as you would imagine. Just in the same pattern we saw with the heroin deaths. We are on that list, on that short list of the counties with the largest fentanyl-related problem. And again, I don't think we are anywhere near the end of this thing yet. We probably should spend a little time talking about these fentanyl analogs as well. Furofentanyl, acetylfentanyl, butyrophentanyl, these, are, analogs created to create higher and higher effects of the medication, make it more potent. Carfentanyl is the one that really does scare people. If you've heard of carfentanyl, the first time we engaged carfentanyl as a healthcare system was out at Animal Kingdom probably 15 years ago. We were asked to come out and talk to the veterinarians, because they use carfentanyl to tranquilize their large animals, rhinos and elephants and things like that. And their specific ask to us was, if this stuff so much as touches our mucous membranes, gets splashed in our eye, we're going to go unconscious and we'll probably be dead within a matter of minutes. Can you guys do anything about that? And my response was, the only thing we can do is give you massive amounts of Narcan. And there was no good answer for them. And of course, they've been very careful, because we haven't seen that happen. But that actually did happen in some cases out in the actual wild areas where they were dealing with these animals. Well, guess what? Carfentanyl is on our streets now. And it's on our streets in an illicit form that, again, creates problems with understanding what the mixtures are. And if I had to tell you the one drug that law enforcement needs to be aware of when we describe fentanyl, it's not probably as much the standard run-of-the-mill fentanyl, it's those combinations that have the super high potency analogs like carfentanil in it. And then again, you see it in all forms and fashions. This is a problem of opportunity. People that are making and selling these drugs can do whatever they want to them. They press these pills, these medications or these drugs into what looks like standard pills. People are buying what they think is an oxycodone, and it may have one of many different opiate and opioids in it, which is what I think has brought us to the point that people that might have had regular sort of standard in their minds, predictable use of an opioid over many years, now are dying because they're taking medications and drugs that they can't really predict anymore. Let me quickly talk about the Heroin Task Force and where we are with that. The task force is co-chaired by Mayor Jacobs and Sheriff Demings. I was, lucky enough to be involved. There was 22 community leaders involved. We developed subcommittees, and each subcommittee was focused on different components of the problem. We met for about 6 months. They approved 37 recommendations that we are in the process of implementing now. And the approach in the very beginning, as the sheriff reminded us, was a balancing between supply and demand. This was not a law enforcement, only problem. We had to find a way to address it from the supply and demand side. And I'm going to speak mostly about the demand side, and I think Captain Espinosa will talk more about the law enforcement component. But the approach on the demand side was really, we had adopted a notion that you have to sort of partition things out into reasonable categories that you can apply interventions to. What do you do about folks that have never used an opiate, that might be at risk but have not started the drugs? What do you do about folks that are living a hardcore life of addiction? And what do you do about folks that have gone through that process and now want to try to do something different? The interventions are different for each group. Prevention, you can improve by talking to people about what the risks are. And this is, usually younger groups. What about reducing heroin addiction? How do you get people out of the life of addiction? It's a very expensive and actually very long-term process. It doesn't happen overnight. And then how do you avoid people from dying that are using heroin now? And that's the approach we took. Probably the most immediate intervention was to get naloxone, the antidote to an opiate overdose, in the hands of not just the community, folks in the community that might be using this drug, but what about those that would be on the scene trying to save their lives, law enforcement? Naloxone is very, very easy to use and probably the most effective medication you could ever imagine. It's been in the EMS world for a long, long time, including the medical world as well. But now every deputy on the Orange County Sheriff's Office is equipped with naloxone, and we have it across several different jurisdictional boundaries. We now have it in the hands of over 1,000 law enforcement officers, including the Sheriff's Office, OPD, UCF, FDLE, Belle Isle, and Windermere, and we hope that those numbers will continue to increase. And what can I tell you? There were many lives saved because of this intervention. There are tens and tens of people walking around alive today that wouldn't be alive had we not seen this intervention go into motion. But there's also wider access to naloxone. You don't have to be a law enforcement officer or an EMS person to get it anymore. You can go into any pharmacy, Walgreens or CVS in the entire state of Florida, and you can buy this on your own. We've also been able to distribute some naloxone out of our Orange County Medical Clinic for folks that can't afford to buy it. But again, putting it in the hands of the community was essential. And as I said, we've worked on this with the private vendors. It's still expensive, but it's out there for those that can afford to get it. On the law enforcement side, Carlos will probably get into this a little bit more deeply. There's an elevated bond schedule for heroin-related arrests, and now fentanyl, which was not associated with a trafficking charge in the past, has been now reworked so that there is a trafficking charge effective October 2017. At the Orange County Corrections Department, Chief Riley has been instrumental in implementing. One was a new program, nobody had done this yet, Chief Riley's team has over 500 doses of Narcan that have been distributed to inmates leaving the jail that came in identified as somebody at risk of dying of a fatal overdose. And there are probably, on any given day, 200 people identified as opioid or heroin addicts in the jail, and probably 2,000 people that come through every year. I would say at least that come through every year that identify that way. We've also implemented a Naloxone pilot program. This is a work in progress. It's expensive and it's tedious. As you can tell, the screening process, where we started with almost 1,200 people that wanted to be in the program, after you screen them through because of the medical requirements, we only gave it to 50 people. But we got more funding available for that, and we're continuing to track that program, see what the long-term benefit of that will be. Back to how do you keep people from going down this pipeline is really educating folks on the risk of these drugs and really making sure that people understand what the implications are of the very, very first use. We've got information out there about neonatal abstinence syndrome. We've got training available for law enforcement officers for their part. The It's Against Heroin website, it's a one-stop shop website on the county website to help folks get that information, everything from how do you get help to how do you avoid getting there in the first place. Carol's been great about going around the community with the law enforcement partners as well, and getting information like chasing the dragon into the hands of educators and other community-oriented organizations. Again, back at that message of how do we keep people that have never used this drug from using it. The approach similar to what we've seen with the youth folks and the use of tobacco. And on the treatment side, a lot of attention being paid to maintaining a pipeline towards treatment. If somebody wants to get treated, they've had that moment, maybe they've been to a hospital and they got Narcan and they've survived and they have a moment of clarity, or they're at the jail where we force them through a process of abstinence. They go through their withdrawal period at the jail sometimes, and they've got that moment. Maybe they didn't qualify for the Vivitrol program, but now it's time for them to do something different. They can work through the 201 system to try to get towards treatment. There's also been new money brought forward. We've got federal money, we've got state money, we've got local money that has been committed to this effort. And as I said before, pretty much every component of this is expensive, right? It's cheaper for an addict to stay an addict than it is for them to go through treatment, and that's a real challenge for us. And most people do not have the resources. Most people that are living the life of a heroin addict do not have the resources to pay for what is needed, because it can go on for many, many months. So this additional funding is essential to kind of get us where we want to get. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Espinosa or Fred. Okay.
Good. Thanks so much, Dr. Rawls. Appreciate that. Wonderful job bringing a lot of us from kindergarten up through high school when it comes to the medical side of the drug abuse. Dr. Rawls, a couple of those slides you showed us are very alarming. Those two hockey stick slides showing the number of heroin deaths and fentanyl-related deaths here. If that doesn't shock us into action, I don't know what will. Those are real lives, real families impacted like that, and we appreciate what you've been doing on the medical side. As Dr. Rawls mentioned, we're very fortunate to have two outstanding speakers when it comes to the drug abuse epidemic here in Central Florida and the state as well as the nation. Dr. Rawls on the medical side, and on the law enforcement side, we are lucky to have Captain Carlos Espinosa of the Orange County Sheriff's Office Narcotics Unit with us here this morning. Captain Espinosa has been employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office for 26 years and is currently the commander of the narcotics section. Like many of the leaders in Sheriff Demings' staff, Captain Espinosa has had a diverse career within the Orange County Sheriff's Office, which included assignments within the Communications Division, Uniform Patrol Division, Criminal Investigations, Professional Standards Section, Court Security Section, Special Investigations Division. He has served on the Orange County Heroin Task Force, where he co-chaired the Law Enforcement Subcommittee and still serves as a law enforcement liaison to the Heroin Task Force Advisory Committee. Please join me in welcoming Captain Carlos Espinosa.
Good morning. I'll try to be a little bit brief to get you guys hopefully to a break here pretty soon, Sheriff. I hope you're going to give us a break here pretty soon. The heroin update is going to be, you're going to see some of the stuff that we've already seen. Let's see, forward. Back in 2015 is really when we started identifying this as a problem. If you remember 2012, 2013, 14, the pill mills, we were very successful in shutting them down. And as Dr. Ross said, we created this other monster now. 2015, you see the numbers there. The total overdoses for Orange County, the deaths. 2016, you see the increase there. 2016, you see the decrease in deaths. And I think that's because of some of the awareness from the Heroin Task Force. Also, the use of Naloxone and the Narcan starting to be distributed seem to have a big impact. And then this year now, you see that the overdoses are continuing to increase. However, our deaths are also going up a little bit. This is the number of arrests that we've had in the last 2 years. As you can see, through August of this year, we're at 451. We're putting a lot of people in jail. These are only heroin-related arrests. And I think that it's important to note that when we talk about the heroin addict and the person that gets arrested, a lot of times, especially our civilian population, doesn't realize. So if someone overdoses and you call in for that person, whether you're the person who overdosed or the person who reports it, you're basically immune from being prosecuted for possession. You can be charged with other crimes if there's other crimes applicable, but as far as possession goes, you won't be charged. And the reason for that is that the legislature wanted people to call in. We want you to report an overdose. We don't want you to stop and clean up first. We want you to get help to that person that overdosed. And again, life saving is at the core of this. The Heroin Task Force, the sheriff and the mayor created it back in 2015. Several different disciplines brought together, and it's been talked about quite a bit, so I won't go into it too much, other than the awareness part of this. You'll see that some of the things that it's achieved, the deployment of Narcan just at the sheriff's office alone since 2016 in July when we started this, 110 saves, already more this month that are not included. The focus for us is going to be on the dealers. We're trying to get the dealers and the traffickers arrested. We worked with the chief judge to increase their bond amounts for that. We thought that was some sort of significant showing the community that when we put them in jail, we would like for them to disrupt the organization as long as possible. The trafficking and fentanyl bill the governor signed will take effect in a couple of days. The good thing about this is there's always been a federal trafficking and fentanyl bill, but not at the state level. So by passing it at the state level and having it where it's the same numbers as it is for heroin. So if you're within the grammage, the proper gram amount, then you'll be charged as well with trafficking. The training and the awareness. It says here the joint operations with the federal government. Our heroin overdoses are very difficult. When people die specifically, they're very difficult to prove and get somebody to charge with the death related to that case. The federal system is a little bit easier, I guess, for lack of a better term, to get through. Thanks, Steph, for that, Joe. I appreciate it. It's a little bit easier to get through. And so we've been successful, and actually through one of our task force officers working with the DEA, identified an individual working on the dark web, which if you're not familiar with that, it's the whole underbelly of the internet, and through the dark web was actually selling fentanyl to people. And we've been able to tie 3 deaths to that person. He's been charged by the U.S. attorney, and as many as up to 9 deaths. And this guy was a guy in Pennsylvania selling fentanyl throughout the United States. So pretty happy about that case. Hopefully more to come. And speaking to the ASAC Walsh was saying that they expect to make more cases. So that's good. You've heard about fentanyl. I'll just touch on this with fentanyl. When it comes to law enforcement, you know, this is something that's serious. It could be absorbed through your skin. You saw the one where Chief Mina talked about his detective. He had basically opened up a container at a heroin call where a person died. And as he opened that container, some of it must have gotten into the air. So that made them feel some of those respiratory type issues and stuff. So it can get on your skin. You have to be careful with it. Also, how you take it to court when you testify now. You know, prosecutors are not able to show it. It's going to become a whole different thing how we handle evidence based on this fentanyl issue and the dangers it poses. I know later on this month I'm speaking at Florida Hospital, and Dr. Rawls, I was going to ask you to hopefully come help me out with this. The doctors there want to know, what do you do with patients who come in and maybe have it on their clothing, maybe have it on their property, and they come in. So This stuff is becoming more and more of an issue that we're going to have to deal with. Some of the challenges to success, it's people won't go get help. If you're a heroin addict and you understand how an addict thinks, you're probably dealing with a lot of functioning addicts in your day-to-day business anyway. They won't go get help because they know they're going to get sick again. And that sickness is what they want to avoid. Sadly, they do commit other crimes when they're trying to go through this. They are going to prostitute themselves. They are going to steal from their family members. They are going to break into other people's property. They are going to commit armed robberies. They're going to do whatever they can to get enough money to buy that next fix. And so some people might go, well, you know, come on, who would do it? Well, an addict does that. That's what they do. And if you're not one, you really can't understand it. And understanding how they are and trying to get them the proper treatment is the issue. In Orange County, we have fewer than 40 beds for people who don't have the means to take care of these addiction problems. So you can see how the problem is. You know, we've already arrested almost 800 of them and only 40 beds for treatment. It's a big issue. It's also difficult to do the prosecutions of them. When we do address someone that's a dealer or in trafficking, it's difficult. It's difficult when these guys don't confess to stuff. It's difficult bringing all the elements that the state requires to successfully prosecute people. It's not just as easy as going, well, sometimes it's as easy as going, he sold me the dope, and you can prove it. But there's a point system attached to this. There's all sorts of issues that they don't get punished for. So prosecution of these people is also a challenge for us that we have to deal with as well. And the biggest issue really is that most people don't see it as their problem. Narcan, good tool, definitely something that is worth carrying. I will tell you this, in some agencies, and it's not to beat them up, you think about it, everybody's kind of reports their constituents, right? So some communities say, we don't want to spend our money to save some addict. The sheriff and the mayor have said just the opposite. We think every life is worth saving. Everybody that gets saved, there can be hope to fix that person. But some communities saying they don't want to spend the money, or they don't have the money to spend on Narcan. You know, it cost us $75 for a 2-dose hit per, 1,000 deputies. So you can see how, especially maybe a smaller community, that might really affect their budget. Looking forward, hopefully we can find some other responses to dealing with this. Getting money to help with the treatment is going to be the key thing. You know, we put people in jail on a regular basis for this stuff, and the punishment part will get worked out. But it's really getting the treatment and stopping the addiction. By the way, the stat is sort of misleading because that's just who overdoses. That's how we know who's dying, is the people they have to overdose. But this affects blacks, Hispanics, whites, old people, young people. We're not seeing too many under 18, which is good. Most of the ones that we see, and again, these are overdoses, are in that 24 to 30-year range. But we are seeing now older people in their 60s, overdosing on heroin. Where we used to not see too many black people, we're seeing more black people now overdose on heroin. This isn't just it's an issue that crosses all sorts of boundaries. In Orange County, we average right now currently over 3 overdoses per day and about 1 death every 10 or 11 days. And as you can see, those aren't good numbers. And I know that we're not as bad as some other parts of the country, but that's not the standard that we want to have. We need to try and fix it. You can take your break now.
Thank you, Captain Espinosa. You know, there are some of us of a certain age. We remember the old throwaway comedic line, better living through better chemistry. But when you see the presentations that the captain and the doctor gave us here this morning, that line is no longer funny. Those numbers are alarming, and the impact they have on our community, it's an insidious impact. And as Captain Espinosa mentioned, the drug overdose epidemic cuts across all boundaries, racial, economic, ethnic, age. It doesn't matter. It does not discriminate. I do take heart, though, in knowing that we've got folks like Sheriff Demings and Mary Jacobs that are heading up the task force. Governor Scott has declared the statewide public health care crisis on this issue, and then we've got great professionals like Dr. Rawls and Captain Espinosa working on this issue. Will you please join me once again thanking Dr. Rawls and Captain Espinosa.